I'd like to thank our witnesses who've appeared before us today and just take a moment to make sure that I have clarity and that those who may be watching have clarity and that members of this committee have clarity about what we're discussing and what we're not discussing. If you could each just repeat briefly. It's been your testimony today that repealing the 91 and the 02 AUMFs will have no impact on our security, on our operations. In fact, they will have positive impacts on our relations with Iraq, on a demonstration that the constitutional roles in the democratic process can actually function. And I will speak for myself, not ascribing this to the administration. One might view that action as the beginning step in rebalancing the operational roles between the executive and the legislative, in particular, the constitutional role of the Senate, the declaration of war. So could you just please, each of you, am I understanding you correctly? The repeal of 91 and 02 will have no impact on our security or deterrence and would in fact be a positive for our nation?
I agree with you, Senator.
Mr. Bilsing.
That is correct, Senator.
Ms. Kress.
Yes, Senator. There are no ongoing military operations that rely solely on the 2002 AUMF.
So it's my hope that we will proceed to take this important first step and repeal these two outdated and no longer relevant or necessary AUMFs. But there's been a lot of conflating those two AUMFs and the 01 AUMF, and I think that's largely because of a dynamic where the 01 AUMF has been stretched beyond all recognition in terms of its scope and reach from what was contemplated when it was initially adopted. The chairman referenced the process many of us went through in 2013, where we debated and ultimately passed in a robust and bipartisan way an AUMF related to Syria. Let me ask just a few questions, if I could. The United States recently carried out strikes on al-Shabaab targets in Somalia. And I think that raises exactly the sorts of questions about scope, about narrowness, about adding new combatants that's really at the heart of our debate and our concerns. Ms. Sherman, if you might, given the 01 AUMF doesn't mention al-Shabaab or Somalia, how did we come to be at war with al-Shabaab? And has al-Shabaab ever specifically targeted Americans or our homeland prior to the Obama administration determining it was an associated force?
Right. As you noted, Senator, the Obama administration determined and notified Congress in 2016 that al-Shabaab is covered by the 2001 AUMF as an associated force of al-Qaeda. The determination was made with respect to al-Shabaab because, among other things, al-Shabaab has pledged loyalty to al-Qaeda in its public statements, made clear that it considers the United States one of its enemies, and been responsible for numerous attacks, threats, and plots against U.S. persons and interests in East Africa. In short, al-Shabaab has entered the fight alongside al-Qaeda and is a co-belligerent with al-Qaeda in hostilities against the United States, making it an associated force and therefore within the scope of the 2001 AUMF. As I understand it, and my legal colleagues, I should say to this committee, I am not a lawyer. My understanding is that it was, in fact, the 2001 AUMF that allowed for the domestic law basis for this, and as a matter of international law, the legal basis for use of force by the United States in the territory of Somalia is consent of the Somali government itself. So that is my understanding. I don't know if my colleagues have anything they want to add.
Mr. Visek, Ms. Cross, anything you'd like to add to that? And I'm going to ask you a follow-on briefly on top of that. Did the Biden administration review the Obama or Trump administration's determination that al-Shabaab was an associated force, and if so, on what basis, if it differs in any way from what the Deputy Secretary just articulated?
Senator, first I should say that Deputy Secretary Sherman answered perfectly, and she's proved that she does not need lawyers. But with respect to the review, there is an ongoing review being conducted by the administration across an entire spectrum of counterterrorism issues, including direct action, and we hope to when that review is done, we hope to be as transparent as possible, but it is taking a deep dive look at the entire CT program, and it is underway, but at this point, I don't have anything final to report on that score.
Ms. Kress?
Yes, I have nothing to add, Senator.
Let me just ask whether, in the interest of transparency, something I welcome and will celebrate about the Biden-Harris administration, could you provide a list to this committee of all countries where force has been used pursuant to the 01 AUMF since it was enacted 20 years ago, and a list of groups against whom you believe force may currently be authorized pursuant to the 01 AUMF? Is that a list you could imagine providing to this committee?
Senator, I know that we report as a matter of course on our activities under the in regular war power reporting, and also pursuant to various provisions of the NDAA on military operations, including their location, as well as groups that are targeted. Whether we have the ability to go back 20 years, I don't want to necessarily commit to that. I think if we have that, I don't see why we would not be able to provide that.
Madam Deputy Secretary, I wondered if you could make any commitment to us that we would have an open debate about the current groups and nations in which authorization is believed to rest on the 01 AUMF.
As I said earlier, Senator, we absolutely are open to open conversation with you about how the 2001 AUMF might be revised, including the groups that should be covered, and how we might have an ongoing process to ensure a strong partnership between the Congress and the executive branch in this matter.
Well, thank you. Before I turn to Senator Young, I'm just going to say how much I appreciate your articulated commitment to finding a way to craft an AUMF that is more narrow, more specific, that has a clear process for adding territories or groups, and that would include an end date. That is a direct challenge to this committee and to the Senate to engage in a respectful, appropriate, and constitutionally necessary dialogue with this administration about our role and your role in both securing the people of the United States and in demonstrating our ability to exercise our constitutional responsibilities. Senator Young.